What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host, the number one U.S. men's national team fan, Dave
Jeez.
Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing, man?
Just like Bob Iger, once I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Yeah, FIFA World Cup started. I know that you're excited for it. Will you be watching USA versus England
No,
Friday, Black Friday? No.
no, don't care.
What?
I don't like soccer. I don't
At
care.
all? We'll
Nah,
watch F1, but not
dull,
soccer.
dull. I don't like the storylines in soccer. It's really boring to me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Seems like you're more interested in Bob Iger's return. Tell me about that.
Well, I know, just un unexpected. Uh, you know, coming into today, last night. Not that it's totally out of nowhere, but obviously big move in the industry that'll have reverberating effects as expected around Disney, which has had a rough 2022, like many entertainment firms. So something to watch without question.
Definitely something to watch. I felt pretty good that I made some moves to acquire some Disney stock last week, just to you know buy the dip. We'll see how that goes. Uh, anyways, I'm excited that he's back because Disney. I think some of the stuff they've been putting out, as we've talked about with some Marvel products, other than Andor, which we're going to be talking about next week, fairly disappointing this year. So I think it's good to get a steady hand back at the helm. I
Mhm.
also just love that he was like, "There's no way I'm coming back, no chance in hell." And then like less than a year later, he's like, "Oh yeah, pay me enough money, I'll certainly come back."
He
So
loves to be in the mix. That's the kind of guy he is. But he's more than just a suit. He's uh, a positive with creatives. People like working for him. People didn't like working for Bob Chapek. So we'll probably see some things change in the media future. I wonder how like the backlash at the Disney parks with the Genie Plus and like the upselling and the price increases of various forms. Wonder how quickly we'll see that get changed.
yeah, actually, I had somebody who I work with who's a big Disney head. Took his son for the first time with his partner, and he's been probably like 20 plus times Disney, and he was like, "It's gotten really expensive." And for someone that's been that many times to like comment on that when they've balled out a number of times to go see all the attractions, pretty noticeable. And I know that the price changes have been a big talking point for many. So we'll see. I hope Iger moves Disney in a good direction. I'm sure Disney will continue to just be a mammoth. But let's switch gears and get into a non-Disney product, the English, a Jeff Bezos product. Go from one monopoly to another. Um, yeah, the English was a TV series, short series that we didn't talk about last week, but came out and dropped all of its episodes last week. And I think it was something that we were interested in, but I was going in fairly blind for this one. But you tell me Emily Blunt is doing a mini series, and I mean, why not watch it, right? What'd you think of the English? English is 6 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of right. Like, I didn't really have any expectations or anticipation for The English as a series, but when I saw it was starring Emily Blunt and was the latest series from Hugo Blick, who we last talked about with Black Earth Rising on Netflix with Michaela Cole, I was like, well, that's a TV voice that's pretty established over the last 10 years. And Emily Blunt, of course, is a star who's been killing it for years at this point. Might as well check it out. I like Westerns. I have Amazon Prime. Most people in England have the BBC, so very accessible. And yeah, I mean, what a confounding but still kind of good show The English is. It's kind of like our thoughts on Black Earth Rising. I think this Hugo Blick's like style of storytelling is very specific to him,
Mm.
which is cool that he has his own voice. But I think there's definitely some ups and downs with his approach, at least in the English. So I liked parts of it, but I did find really just the plot and the narrative uh, difficult to follow and stick with as we meet more and more supporting characters, and just the core tension of the plot with our two lead characters is just a bit muddled. But still looks great. I think the acting is really strong. So, overall, it's pretty solid. But I think there was kind of a major flaw with like the storytelling.
Yeah, yeah, I felt similar. This was actually one of the rare instances where I felt like you have a mini series, a television show that should have just been a two, maybe 2 hour and 15-minute movie. Um, because I think what you get with Blunt and Cheske Spencer as Cornelia and Whip, Wounded Wolf, is really strong. Those two performances obviously carry it, but I think they have a great chemistry. Although I think the romantic chemistry I didn't necessarily feel, and that was an aspect I wish they just decided not to go with. But we'll get
Hmm.
more into that. But then I feel like you get these like this meandering western feel where it's almost kind of like bottle episode in some aspects, and it's like, man, I don't know how much the like side quests or the side stories really grabbed me. I always just kind of wanted to go back to whatever Cornelia was getting at, and how her and Whip were kind of working towards those goals together. I think I think the side stories were varying degrees of successful, but like you said, show looks great. I mean, when they get back to whatever is going on with Cornelia and Eli, that's when the show is I think humming on all cylinders. And then you get a couple of I think standout performances, here and there. I think Rafe Spall as
Mm.
David Melmont, the villain, gets a lot to chew on, and he's certainly chewing on it. I think the flashback is pretty effective and gutting, and definitely I think highlights the overall message of it, which is like, yeah, white men fucking ruined all this shit. That we're
Mm.
just horrible towards um, minorities and women, and um, yeah, it's very sad the like commercialization of the West, and how
Yeah.
that's kind of told in this. So effective storytelling, but definitely some things I didn't like as well. What were the like episodes or moments that stood out to you most?
I think in general, like obviously, like the Western is a very popular and still effective genre, but like this specific like moment, it's like 1890, like end of the Indian Wars, taming of the American West time, right? And a big part of that, I think, is a lot of hardship with native populations, which is covered in this show pretty extensively. But I think like there's still a lot of like great tension with that, especially when you have a character like Eli Whip, who is a Pawnee man who worked with the U.S. Army and thus had to uh, fight against his fellow native in the process. Like that's a really great character and contradiction of a person, and I think this show also, with some of those other side characters you meet, brings along with that other perspective of like native people trying to find their way in a post-West world. Like I think they do a good job of kind of establishing like the all the territories that are being formed up by the government and who can lay claim to the lands and stuff like that. I like all
Mhm.
that stuff. I think just sometimes the side stories just kind of distracted me, I think, because I feel like I just didn't need to meet like another like shitty or morally ambiguous white settler type. Like I feel like
Mhm.
we had enough of those on the show. I actually would have preferred more native perspectives.
Mhm.
Um, just because I think it's more interesting. A lot of those uh, you know, cowboy types, I feel like you kind of know what you're getting with those. Now, sometimes I think there's a lot of good stuff with that, like Black Eyed Mog. That character is just very memorable, as a
Yeah.
side character with her eyes and whatnot, and the way she talked and stuff. But yeah, like I think just when Whip was interacting with other Native Americans, I thought that was awesome, and just him in general. Like I think Spencer's like presence on screen is incredibly evident. Um, as a memorable native figure on screen. And I think I liked him more than Blunt. Like I think Blunt's good in the show, but like I was expecting her to be a bit more rousing. There was actually a lot more, I think, like tragedy to her character than I was expecting, selfishly.
Mm.
Um, but of course, she's really, I think, comfortable in this kind of setting, as we know with her career and stuff like. Edge of Tomorrow or even Jungle Cruise last year, right? Like she can handle this kind of stuff and she does it quite well. I think my favorite moment overall was in episode 5 when they're Whip and Cornelia are trying to survive against that sniper who's trying to take
Mm,
shots at them at long distance, and how
yeah.
that's going. And the sniper is leaning back, aiming his gun along his legs crossed.
Hmm.
Like stuff like that, like little moments I quite enjoyed. Um, but yeah, like I said, like, I think the plot overall is a bit hard to grasp onto. But moment to moment, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I thought one of the side quests that did work for me was actually the native couple, who's
Exactly.
like exploiting the white folk and the people passing through. And I thought it was interesting to kind of get that perspective, and like that was a take that I hadn't ever really considered. But that makes a lot of sense. It's like they're in some ways just profiting off of the idiocy and the people not knowing what they're doing. I also I also liked the like chase sceneness of the I don't know if it was like I think it was a German
Hmm.
German settlers and like trying to get the kids back together. I thought that was pretty interesting as well. But like not it's like I remember moments of it, but other moments kind of fell short. I think like I think there's like some great moments and some things that come through with the side quest, but I really wanted to get back to like, okay, what is Cornelia getting at here? Like, tell me more about this relationship that she keeps referring back to. Like, it's so like shrouded in mystery, and I think Whip is like a very like complicated but like very interestingly drawn character in terms of his history as a soldier with the United States Army, working for them out in the West. You see the flashback to that massacre and him kind of being the one that had to like find these soldiers, and what a complicated uh like dynamic that is, and just how he feels so torn. I thought that all was pretty interesting. I have to say, if you ask me like how did they get from point A to point B and like what was the overall like plot, it would be very difficult to, I think, summarize it, but it was just enough to kind of keep me interested every single episode, which I give them a lot of credit for. Tell me about the things like, or like moments that maybe you wish were a little different or things you would have cut out. Like for me, I mentioned the romance wasn't
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I agree on the romance. I think a lot of stuff with those soldiers, just like
Mm,
them as antagonists, like there's a lot of like back and forth and jumping forward and back with the timelines, and like it just felt a bit convoluted because ultimately it's not a complicated story or
right.
plot, but the way it's told makes it come across that way and harder to follow than it really should be. It's just stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think the idea of them being these two like broken people who find each other and then are like companions through this like scary like new world for Cornelia and this like broken world and hopeless world for Eli was enough already. Seeing them like I don't know, like I think it's episode 5 when they finally like kiss, and it's like I didn't even feel like a romantic presence between them, and then I think they kind of I felt like that was a bit forced. I think they would have been okay regardless of that, but what did you think of the very end? Like I think they're taught she's talking to their child, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean the whole development like of like the syphilis side of it, I was like, oh, this kind of snuck
Mm.
up on me as a
Yeah.
added like dramatic weight. It's like, it's all right, I guess. I think it was a good way to ground it though in the forward advancement of time with like the Buffalo Bill show and like what that represented for Native people in the post West time. So that was, I think, effective, and like kind of like that postscript with like those flash forward scenes are good enough. But yeah, like I don't know, I wasn't super invested in a lot of the like personal dramas of it by the end.
Yeah. Yep, completely agree. Uh, I am interested to see if because this has gotten fairly good reviews. I wonder if Amazon, as they're still kind of figuring out how to build out their streaming platform. Uh, I mean, they have some great series. We talked about The Boys, we talked about Lord of the Rings. I wonder if they might start building out more of these mini series, though. Getting some creators that
Mm.
just want to like do some stuff I mean, you had the small axe stuff.
Right.
Was that 2 years ago now? Jeez.
Yeah,
Uh,
2020. Yep.
but I think this sort of thing is kind of I think a lane that they could start infringing on HBO's
Yeah.
territory a bit.
Well,
So
they do have the Donald Glover deal that
true.
will soon bear fruit with Atlanta ending. Maybe Donald and friends go down the miniseries route. Who can say?
Yeah, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, obviously they have a good relationship with her with Fleabag, so
Yep.
you get the creators, people will come. Um, let's switch gears though to the big screen where Dave putting in that work for She Said, a movie that Dave saw and basically no one else saw this weekend.
Yes, yes. She said had a very disappointing box office, like $2-ish million in a wide release. Very, very poor, very disappointing. Continuing the trend of adult dramas more or less struggling at the box office, unfortunately. Which also is unfortunate because I think She Said is a genre subgenre, which is the journalism movie pursuit of a story movie that is quite popular and well liked and familiar formula for a reason because it's often very effective. She Said, of course, is about the recent developments, which of course is the Liz Tui, Jodie Cantor pursuit to tell the Harvey Weinstein sexual misconduct Miramax Weinstein Company story in the New York Times, which of course came out in 2017. And me and you, we remember this. I think most people remember this. This is relatively recent news. This story, and I think that's what makes it a bit different from a movie like All the President's Men or Spotlight. The beacons of this genre, which came out just a bit further removed from the events they are dramatizing. Right. Everything with Me Too and the reckoning that caused, gratefully, of course, is still very fresh, very new with people, right? Like Weinstein, he got his sentencing like less than a year ago, right? This is very, very fresh, but nonetheless, we have She Said come out. That story got a Pulitzer Prize. The reporters made it into a book, and now we've adapted this book into a film. Maria Schrader, the German actor and director who made Unorthodox for Netflix, is the director at the helm here, and then you cast it with I think two big time well liked directors, actors, Carrie Mulligan and Zoe Kazan, and I think She Said is good. It's effective. It hits all those notes you expect from a journalism story. I think the one thing that I think holds She Said back is that this story and like, the way this story is told, it doesn't quite have as much dramatic tension as some other, paragons of this genre. I think that's the one thing that can maybe make or break a journalism drama, where if you don't see those reporters feeling like they're racing against the clock or in some kind of personal danger, whatever it might be, then you might be lacking a bit of tension, a bit of drama. I think She Said maybe falls more in line with a movie like The Post, the Spielberg movie recently about the Panama Papers. You know, that being said, I think Kazan and Mulligan are really good, especially Carrie Mulligan. Like she just makes the most badass like journalist I've ever seen. Like I think everyone would just immediately tell her whatever she asked if they were questioned by her. Uh, Nonetheless, I think the really the shining moments of She Said would be these two scenes with two victims of Harvey Weinstein when they're being interviewed, and that would be Samantha Morton playing Zelda Perkins and Jennifer Ely playing Laura Madden, and they were two key sources that went on the record to help push the New York Times to publish a story when they did, and those two scenes, I think, are She Said it's most dramatic, most personal, most affecting. Obviously it's a terrible story that everyone knows at this point, but when you see it, I think kind of dramatized via the personal, individual side of that story. I think that's where you really get into the nitty gritty of it, and like it feels most affecting. You know, You have Andre Brower as Dean McKay at the New York Times and Patricia Clarkson as Rebecca Corbett. They don't get a whole lot to do. They're only in it just a little bit. Although I did think Andre Brower was like really great as McKay, particularly when he's just like basically telling Weinstein to fuck off on the phone. She said makes a clear decision to not put Harvey Weinstein in the movie. They just show him like from the back, and they have his voice in the film. But it's really a story, about, a movie about the reporters and the reporters meeting some of the victims that end up, helping them tell that story. So it's kind of been pegged as a Oscar contender. I think it's kind of like probably a back half like Best Picture nominee might get in there. And on the acting side of things, they're running Carey Mulligan and supporting actress, which might help her get through. We'll see
Hmm.
about that. Obviously, Carey Mulligan nominated multiple times. Just 2 years ago, A Promising Young Woman, so she's on the awards season mind for sure. But yeah, I think she said, it's a really good, really solid journalism movie, but doesn't quite reach the highs of like the best of the genre, which of course is totally fine. I think it was kind of interesting to watch this movie, really knowing where it's going the whole time because it's so fresh. And I
Mhm.
think that might be more of a fault to some people than it is to me. But yeah, I would still recommend it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Love Carrie Mulligan. Obviously, I think she's one of the it's just one of the highest hit rates in terms of
Mm,
the films that she makes. But I hear Carrie Mulligan and Zoe Kazan at the top of this, and then I think about some of the more well known of these, like The Post or Spotlight. Those all have much bigger actors at the top.
yeah,
And, the small box office almost feels like if this was like Florence Pugh as the lead, would that have gotten more people to go? Or is it that the
right,
story, if it's hard to like understand why this one flopped because I think people are interested in this. I wonder if maybe there's also some fatigue around the story because
yeah.
I mean, Weinstein recently was just in the news. I forgot if his case is was he sentenced recently? Was that
He
what
was
happened?
sentenced in the U.S., but he has other pending charges. I believe he has
Of course.
charges in London still pending, and whatever.
Uh,
He gone for
yeah.
sure. But I mean, yeah. To that point, All the President's Men stars Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. Just a bit of a
Yeah.
different caliber of star there.
Exactly. So I wonder if that would have made a difference. But I can't wait to check it out when I get a chance. Add it to my list of must sees for the year. But let's keep it moving to smaller screen, bigger star, Florence Pugh, as I was just mentioning, um, in The Wonder on Netflix. Um, yeah, I had an interesting experience with this movie where I really felt like the first half of it or so, I was like, I don't know if this is my cup of tea. I don't know if this movie's really what I'm looking for. And then things really start to flip and shift with it. And I felt like the second half, I was really sucked in and really like into the movie and what it was trying to say. And things started to kind of click for me. Did you have that same feeling?
Yeah, I think so. The Wonder, kind of right away, you understand the core of the conflict. We're set in like countryside Ireland, 1862, not too soon after the, of course, infamous potato famine.
Right.
And Pugh's character is brought in as an English nurse to figure out what's up with this titular wonder, this girl who hasn't eaten for 4 months. But it's quite clear right away that, like, obviously some sus shit's going on. There's some fraudulent behavior in this village. Scammers are about. And it's, I think like that tension of like, what's gonna happen? Like, well, that, like, I was pretty convinced that like the movie wasn't gonna suddenly have some divine turn and like there be some real miracle shit going on, right? But I think the movie has to progress far enough to bring you to that point where Pugh's character tells the truth to the people that want to know, but then she's not believed, and then you actually get the real tension of like, what are they gonna do?
Mhm.
Is she just gonna give up and let this girl die, or is she gonna find some way to take matters into her own hands? But you kind of have to get to that point, right? Because the first half is a lot of observation and thinking, basically. um, but yeah, I think once it kind of ratchets it up in that second half, it's like, oh, okay, this actually. I think it wraps up like just neatly enough. I think, um, and overall, it had a bit of an atmospheric vibe as a period piece in the countryside. So yeah, I still had a pretty good time with it.
I definitely had a good time with it. I think as I was saying, the first half, as Pew is like meeting this ultra religious family, kind of talking with the council, laying the groundwork of like who everybody is. There's like an air of mystery to it, which I think is like the main thing that kept me interested. But once Pew finds out, how the family is actually like feeding her and kind of keeping this ruse going, and you have the I don't know if it's a confrontation between Lib and the daughter there.
Hmm.
Then then I think things really start to shift. Anna is the daughter's name, um, because when she like discloses the sexual assault that she was experiencing, the sexual abuse
Yeah.
from the brother, how the brother died and she was blamed for it, and the family is like, like basically like making her like keep up this ruse, this lie to like
Hmm.
create some like kind of like absolution,
Yeah,
of this like
like a
horrible act is.
religious way to pass and thus free her brother from eternal damnation. Basically,
Yeah, like just a yeah, I
bizarre.
think yeah, completely bizarre, but kind of going with the theme of like you believe these stories. People tell themselves stories all the time, and it has this like fourth wall breaking opening and ending,
Yeah.
and then the imagery of the bird in the cage toy that you flip around. I mean, it's all like a bit on the nose, but also I think like fairly effective, which I I ended up enjoying more by the end. And yeah, that second half when Pew is just figuring out how am I going to convince this girl to like accept her story and then believe this new story, I thought was pretty interesting, in order for
Hmm.
her to like believe that she died and now is like reborn as Pew's like daughter, as Nan.
Hmm.
I thought that was all pretty fascinating. I think like going back to the English, similarly, I didn't like the love story in this, right? So you have
Tom
the
Burke.
yeah, Tom Burke as the journalist, William Byrne, who's in England kind of writing up this like, I don't know, interest piece on this. And
Mhm.
I I just don't believe Florence Pugh and him would end up together. I'm sorry.
I
Come
gotta
on.
say, the first sex scene though, I was dying when she's like, "Thank you," and he's like, "No, thank you," and they both laugh. I was like, "Dude, that's actually perfect and quite
Yeah.
realistic, honestly."
No, totally. Completely agree. Yeah, I definitely found that funny. I think I just was like, man, Florence Pugh is one of the like, I don't know, one of the like most uh magnetic people, and
Yes,
Tom Burke
effervescent.
just yeah, just does not exude that same energy. So not quite a match, but that's fine. I mean, this is just a Pugh showcase through and through, and I think she's
Totally.
great.
Yeah.
She can do
Yeah,
this
yeah.
kind of role in her sleep.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, this movie's directed by Sebastian Lelio, the
Hmm.
Chilean filmmaker. We talked about his last movie, Gloria Bell, a few years back. Uh, Honestly, it seems like Florence was probably just kind of able to squeeze this movie into her schedule and got it done. They made this last year.
Hmm.
Um, Netflix picked it up after Telluride. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a movie that slowly shows you that it has more on the mind, and it actually does make good on that fourth wall breaking opening about like the stories we convince yourselves. Because when that starts, it's like, oh, it's a bit hokey, and you have Florence Pugh's voice lording over you in the background, telling you the thesis of the movie. And next thing you know, you're transported to 1860s Ireland, and it takes you a while to bring it back around, but they do bring it back around. So I enjoyed it, and yeah, it is nice to see an actor of the caliber of Florence Pugh, who's so in demand for higher budget, bigger name things, to also find a way to make time for a much smaller personal movie that is really centered around her acting abilities. So we love to see it.
So this year we got Don't Worry, Darling, The Wonder. She also was in Hawkeye. I mean, what was your favorite Pew performance in the past year?
Are we forgetting something? Or is that it?
Um,
No, that's it, right?
Black Widow, I guess, was the year before.
Yeah, never mind, never mind. And then she'll be in Dune 2 next year. Um,
Yes. It feels like
I think
she's more present than that for sure.
for sure. I think this would be my favorite performance of hers, but I probably actually liked watching "Don't Worry, Darling" more, despite its
Yeah.
flaws. We talked about that. Check the review.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think she's great in this, but again, it almost feels like she kind of sleepwalks with this like broken character who's like cast into this psychological drama. Like
Hmm.
it feels like a lot of what she's done. I actually almost feel like something um like Hawkeye, where she's kind of like out there and having to be a little bit more fun and like she gets to do
Yeah,
an accent. That almost feels like
stealing the
it's
scenes that she's in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I almost want to see her just doing more of that stuff. It's just so much more fun. So
Well, between Dune 2 and Oppenheimer, she's in two movies upcoming that are loaded with A-listers. So I feel like it'll be more in that line because she's not going to
mhm.
command the screen because there's so many stars in them.
She's also gonna be in the Zach Braff movie next year, A Good Person.
Yeah.
Her
That'll
ex
be a
beau
rich text when that one comes out.
for sure. So a lot to dig into. I'm excited to talk more about her, but why don't we why don't we move forward to another movie that I was interested to watch, which is The Menu. Um, and mostly for exactly who's on your screen, Dave. Anya Taylor Joy. Get her and Ray Fiennes in a cook, and or get them in a cook, get them in the same scene. Let them cook, and
Yep.
hopefully you're gonna get something great. Did we get that with The Menu?
Yeah, I like the menu quite a bit. It's a black comedy, suspenseful thriller, satire, amalgamation of a few genres type movie, but a bit of a throwback to you know movie making of the past in that regard. I liked it quite a bit. It's got a lot of fun performances, a lot of showy set pieces or scenes, and at the end of the day, like you said, Anya Taylor Joy, just one of the stars of the moment, one of the stars of today and tomorrow, and it's just great to watch her do what she does because she's great.
She's absolutely great in it. I also really love Ray Fiennes being this like just complete maniac in
Yeah,
like the best way possible in this.
Justin
There's some
Slowick.
there's some fun stuff going on around them. Obviously, everybody gets to be like kind of hamming it up in this, right? I mean, like Nicholas Holt is on like level 10 in his hamminess. It's pretty stupid and
Dude.
ridiculous. I don't mind it though. Um, and yeah, you get like John Leguizamo, which I was like, okay, he's actually pretty perfectly cast. I think
Hmm. Yeah.
this former star who people don't remember, Hong Chow,
Yes.
is I think a scene stealer in this. A really great performance from her, but she's also dialed up. Like everybody is dialed up in this, which I appreciate. Um, you know, I think The Menu could be considered this like commentary on society today in some respect, which I
Mm,
actually don't know if like those messages hit that well for me. But I think if you look at it as talking about like just like the restaurant genre and like the whole like industry, there's a lot more to like agree with there.
yeah.
So I think it kind of depends on what you want to take away from the movie, but I thought it was, like, fairly effective. It's just, like, a searing critique on, like, high food, like,
Yes.
high, deli what are they, delicacies?
Fine dining.
Fine dining, thank you.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. Because early on, before the movie really like opens up all the way, they're setting up Nicholas Holt's character as someone you despise, as this like some food snob type who's like really obsessed with fine dining and like that's their personality, that's their number one hobby, which those people do exist. And when I'm watching it, I'm like, yep, these are the people I just don't like because I just don't feel that way about dining and food the way a person like Holt's character does. And then the movie kind of like moves it around and it's like, oh, is this like an eat the rich type movie? And it
Mhm,
goes into that a little bit. It's a bit surface level. I don't think that's a new perspective, a new commentary. It doesn't really shine anything new in that regard. But then the way it brings it back around again, like you said, where everything gets revealed about the presence of the hamburger, the cheeseburger in
mhm.
this movie, and I think it speaks more about to like the joy of cooking or eating, whatever it might be. And that I think is a bit more of a universal perspective. Again, not that we're really seeing anything new in this in terms of the commentary, but I think that's a more like enjoyable perspective to be with than like the kind of blatant like eat the rich, let me fuck over these rich assholes as the service worker that I am. You know, it's like, all
Right.
right, like whatever. And I liked it more when it was a bit concerned with telling Fine Dine to fuck off a little bit. You know, like Anya Taylor Joy's character Margot, she just starts like laughing and like being completely like not about everything that's going on because she's like a normal person. You know,
Mhm.
like that was the stuff I jive with the most.
Yeah, and I also thought the question about like who are you trying to be in regards to Margot as Aaron, this escort, and when he's like, do you want to be on the side of the guests or do you want to be on the side of the servers in this case? And like how because I forgot what it was that she like called like for help or something like that. They said like, oh, you are on the side of the diners, and then she kind of like flipped it around by like
Hmm.
basically just never giving into this guy's ego.
Right,
I
right.
thought
Stopped
was
eating, sending food
yeah,
back, whatever it might be. Just not not
exactly.
not not going with the program, not following the menu.
I thought that was really great. Not only as like a how is she going to get out of this situation, but the idea of like she's this escort, someone who is not on the same level of status as everybody else in this room. Is being told you're not supposed to be here, but is kind of being lumped in with all these people just by the fact that she's in this room with these people and like how
Hmm.
she's perceived like by the world. I thought that was like like a pretty interesting commentary. um just a few moments that I really liked. I liked when he sends out the like I think it was like a taco shell with like all the things on it, and like people start freaking out like the reviews from like the critic of that got restaurants closed down, or like John
Yes.
Leguizamo and
Yep.
his guys had like tax fraud
Yeah. Like
sheets
printed
or
into
whatever
the
it was.
tortilla or whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought that was pretty funny to like see them all start to kind of realize.
Yep.
Um, I also like it obviously starts turning incredibly dark, but like the guys can run. And I think it was the fifth course, whatever they call it, the men's folly. I thought that was pretty great, where the guys were allowed to like try to run away, and the girls
Yeah.
all came in and were like, "Help us!" And she was like, "Oh no, this was my idea." Like I thought that was pretty good.
Right. And the one guy gets a cupcake for being the last one to get caught.
Yeah,
That was
really
great.
great.
I loved how towards the end, it was like the Nicholas Holt character, right? He's about it. He doesn't want to run. You know, he's happy to be here. This is his
Hmm.
thing. And Slawick Ray finds the way to take him out by just embarrassing the shit out of him. Like, yeah, you might know the definitions of all these cooking techniques and cooking devices and approaches to cuisine, but you're
Hmm.
not a fucking cook,
Yep,
you
you ain't
little
shit.
bitch.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, obviously quite dark, but also I think pretty interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, overall I liked it. I don't think this is like a movie that I'm gonna like find myself searching for when it comes out, but it's one that if people are looking for like a decent like afternoon watch, it's definitely
Yeah,
worth it.
yeah. I wasn't actually sure like what tone the movie would strike because it doesn't fully lean into the suspense side of things. It never really goes down the horror side either. But you definitely could see a version of the menu that leans into like a different side of genre. You know, I think the
Hmm.
menu kind of sticks down the middle by taking from a bunch of different genres. But like when Margot calls for help and like the Coast Guard guy shows up, and then the twist with that happens, like I think that was actually like
Yeah.
a really effective thing, and like that sense of like dread like sets back in, and like they really do I think a good job of keeping you as the viewer on your toes with the plot, which is I think a lot of fun. Notably, this movie was directed by Mark Mylod, who pretty prolific guy, but probably most notably for working on Succession recently. And some of the lesser known actors that are in the room in the menu are actually Succession, supporting characters as well. This was originally supposed to be directed by Alexander Payne and starring Emma Stone. And then
Mm.
obviously it moved forward. And obviously I love Anya Taylor Joy so much. Happy to see her in this, although I do love Emma Stone as well. Definitely would be a different movie, I think, if Alexander
Yeah.
Payne approached this. Probably a bit headier, a bit um, maybe a bit more fulfilling on the thematic side of things. But I think what we got was still a lot of fun.
Definitely a lot of fun. I also just enjoy seeing Anya Taylor-Joy getting these looks, and especially, we saw her at the beginning of the year in one of our favorite movies of the year in The Northman. Um,
Oh yeah,
but you look at what's up next for her. She has Furiosa coming
yep.
out in 2 years,
Just
but
finished
then
filming it.
Super Mario Brothers is like the only thing that's on her officially on her docket next year, which I'm like, we need to get this girl working. We need to get her some more roles.
In a sense, she has been working though, right? Like in the last calendar year, you had Last Night in Soho, The
Yep.
Northman, The Menu, and Amsterdam.
Yep.
You know,
I mean, it's a great look
up
for
and down
now.
range, but like all big time directors that she was involved with, right? She
Yep.
just made movies with Edgar Wright, David O. Russell, and Robert Eggers, and
Pretty good.
in 2 years she'll be in a movie from George Miller. Like she's crushing it for sure. I'm
It,
sure she's turning down shit every day to be
oh,
in.
I'm sure. And I think even more exciting is the fact that, The Northman was so good, and we're just probably going to see Eggers getting bigger and bigger stuff, and him and her seem to have a pretty good working relationship. So I think that could be um, one of her director companions moving forward. So really great stuff. Really enjoy Anya Taylor Joy.
Oh,
But Dave,
speaking of what you just mentioned, she is attached to be in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu
there you
adaptation
go.
as of right now. So
Oh
yes,
yeah,
that is
and
correct.
Bill Skarsgård is playing Nosferatu, right?
Yeah, which
That shit's
is
gonna be
like
fucking
perfect.
dope. It's gonna be so good. Um, Anyways, that's gonna do it for movies this week. Let's transition to music. We're gonna be starting off with an artist we've never talked about, but with an album that's getting a lot of acclaim. Weyes Blood and In the Darkness, Hearts Aglow. Weyes Blood, an artist I've been aware of, and I've heard a few songs but never fully really dove into them. But with this album coming out, I was excited to give her another look. And I knew that Titanic Rising was one of the most critically acclaimed albums of 2019 that we just didn't talk about. So I was like,
Mm.
maybe eventually we'll get to this. And it's I think this is a great time to jump in because this newest album, In the Darkness, Hearts Aglow, I think is really impressive and really well crafted. But I also, as I was listening to it, I was like, Dave's gonna fucking hate this shit. He's not gonna enjoy this at all.
Uh, I liked it more than I thought I would because it's not my genre cup of tea. But I think Natalie Menning, Weighs Blood. I think her vocals are just very unique, very striking,
Yeah.
and ultimately did hold my attention throughout the whole listen, and I liked that a lot. Uh, and I think some of the songs where the instrumentation kind of picks up or goes through some kind of progression, combining that with I think her very noticeable vocals, uh, yeah, was quite good. I think at the end of the day, she just I think really stands out to me as a kind of unique one of one vocalist.
Completely agree. She has a very old school feel to her. She's gotten comparisons to Karen Carpenter. There's Joni Mitchell vibes to her at times, and I think in terms of her song crafting, I mean her writing is excellent. And this is basically a follow up. She said to Titanic Rising, a trilogy of albums that she's doing. We don't know when the third one will be coming out, but about this impending disaster of sorts. This is coming from the middle of this disaster, and the last one I'm
Right.
sure will be aftermath. So interested to see when that third one comes out. But she makes these long, elaborate songs and has these beautiful build up in almost every song with these really great flourishes. I think one of the best examples of that for me was the song Children of the Empire.
Yep.
You get halfway through the song and you get this mandolin kind of
Yeah.
infused in there, and then the song kind of drops back out, builds back up with these swells of strings, and then kind of drops back out again just to build up. It was really impressive, and a lot of that she even stopped singing during. So it's really just this instrumental arrangement that was just something we really haven't heard to this level this year, I thought. So I really liked that one. I think the opener is great. It's not just me; it's everybody. Probably this is what gave me the Joni Mitchell vibes. I was like, okay, this is fantastic, and she's just sounds like an angel on this, right?
Yeah, those are two of the songs I noted for sure. I think "Children of the Empire," like you said, like when those string melodies really pick up, and then the chorus is, I think, quite rousing. I like that a lot. I also really like "Grapevine." I think her vocals are strong on that one, as expected,
Yep.
but also the drums when the drums kick in, it
Yeah.
just all kind of comes together.
Probably my favorite songwriting was "Hearts Aglow," where she's talking about basically this world-ending event and just like wanting to just spend time with this person that she's interested in. I think that's really one of the standout themes from this album is her like perspective on love and how she gets that across the album isn't about like this like really like strong overwhelming romantic love but more so just this like spending time being seen being together. The first song, it's not just me it's everybody, she talks about like being alone at this party and wanting to like connect to other people and then kind of coming to the conclusion other people are probably feeling the exact same way and like how can we connect around our loneliness. So I like her perspectives just on you know love and connection and how you deal with despair and our mortality through it all.
Mhm.
Another song I just wanted to shout out that was I really like near the end and is a bit more in the like I don't know traditional feeling of songwriting because a lot of these songs are fairly non-traditional. Is Twin Flame I really liked. It has a very like I don't know. It feels a bit more poppy than the other ones, which is probably why I liked it. But I think she again just sounds great on it, and I like the like ticking that kind of goes through it, the ticking percussion that kind of drives the song. So um, overall, just really impressed with this. I think we might be talking about it in a few weeks when we do our
Oh,
end of the year list, so
spoilers.
we'll see. But why don't we keep it moving as we switch from I don't know, is this indie rock, I suppose, to
Yep.
Saweetie, where we're talking rap, hip hop. Uh, let's just get down and dirty with the PUSSY.
What's that?
I don't know, but it's something I think Sweetie can tell us about in the single Life EP because man,
Right.
she's talking about it in pretty much every song, and I think this is an EP where the first 3 songs I was like, "Oh, let's fucking go." And then it petered out a little bit, but those first 3 songs, man, I was like,
Yep.
"Sweetie, I like this. I'm down with it."
That's exactly right. Um, yeah, this is the third Saweetie EP. Notably, the Saweetie debut album is still on the way. Pretty Bitch Music. She tells us on the Single Life EP it's coming soon, but it's still not here. So instead, we have another EP from Saweetie.
I'll take it.
Um, yeah, and I think that's right. Right off the jump, Don't Say Nothing. Lyrically, very reminiscent of Glorilla's Nut Quick we just heard
Yes.
last week, and I was like, "Yep, give me all these songs. I love this
Yeah.
shit. I love hearing women stomp on dudes rapping. It's great. Um, and I think Sweetie, obviously, people know like she has I think really fun flow, and when you put that on like something classic to her, which would be Bay Area bounce, it really comes together. It sounds great. Um,
Don't Say Nothing sound like Big Fish to you from Vince?
oh, that's a nice call. Interesting.
It like the flow and the beat just are so bouncy like that. Really
Right.
reminded me of it.
Yeah, totally. Um, I think on Pussy the hook singing is a bit weird. Like I don't know. I didn't love that part of it, but I like the rapping. Um, I think actually No Reception is interesting because that's a bit more of an introspective look from Saweetie, who of course has been you know in the tabloid BS for some time, following her split with Quavo and perhaps association with Little Baby as well. Like it is kind of interesting to hear her perspective and being like how she basically just unplugs and just doesn't choose to engage at all with that
Mhm.
stuff, and it almost speaks to why she maybe is like up and down or in and out of the public eye sometimes, and that's like seems to be very clearly very her choice. On the other side of things, she's still very much like finally crafting an album she's been working on for several years at this point, so I think it's a bit interesting. Ultimately, this is a taster. This is a holdover
Yeah.
type release, and it is a bit interesting that we still haven't got that album because she has released some monster singles that weren't on any
Mhm.
of these EPs. Like think of Tap In, and of course Best Friend with Doja Cat at the beginning of last year. Like she's been dropping some bangers and then filling out with some EPs as well. And um, I hope the album delivers because I feel like there's a lot of like anticipation for it. On the other hand, maybe there's not as much pressure on it now because there's just so many female MCs now. Like we're not like holding Saweetie up on the highest pedestal anymore
Mm,
that we might have been back in 2017 when Icy Girl came out and everyone was really excited about, this
yeah.
brand new rapper. So maybe it's something somewhere in the middle with that, but yeah, I think for a taster holdover EP, there's a few songs to like. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, and she seems to really be finding a niche in using these like 2000s to 90s beats and just like reusing them for herself. Pussy using the juicy beat obviously, and my type using the
Yeah,
freak,
Freak a
is it
Leak.
freak a leak? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I kind of don't hate that
Tap
she's
In,
just
same
kind of,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, she's just leaning into this, like I'm gonna reuse this and just make it my own. And uh I mean the songs are great, so might as well keep going with it. I hope she continues doing it. But yeah, I agree. I think this is just a holdover, but I'll take it. Give us more Sweetie, absolutely. And we'll be adding a Sweetie song to our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist, to check that out. But Dave, time to talk about one of your favorite rappers, our guy Roddy Rich. And I say that in jest because if I remember correctly, you don't really like ride with Roddy Rich, right?
Well, I didn't ride with the last album. Live Life Fast came out less than a year ago, December 2021. That was the sophomore record from Roddy, first release since The Box, of course, took off
Yeeter.
his debut album and became one of the longest running number ones of the 2020s thus far. And Roddy basically fell flat on his face with the follow up record. We talked about it, we didn't like it, there weren't any hits on it. I'm not surprised to see him come back to the well so soon, given how poorly the last full length went. This, of course, Feed the Streets 3, the uh, trilogy capper to his two mixtapes that really put him on the map, where the first hits of his came from. Of course, people know. And I do think Roddy did a better job of getting back to what makes his best music. His best qualities, his best abilities are much more evident on Feed the Streets 3 than they were on Live Life Fast. Is this a great mixtape? No. I think there's still a lot of sameness in the production.
Oh,
And
you
I think
think?
Roddy as a lyricist is still quite up and down. But the highlights on this, I think, are speaking more to, I think, what I like about Roddy Ricch, who really came up and rode the wave and led the way of that melodic kind of auto croony style of Southern hip hop, West Coast hip hop that we've gotten over the last 5 years. Like when he does that well, he does it very well. He can do it good. And I think the moments of him really in his bag at his most comfortable on Feed the Streets 3 are, it's good to hear that, because Live Life Fast, I think, was just a lot of like uninspiring singing from him. He's not a great singer, and when he does it, it's very up and down, but usually down. I like it more when he really combines the two with the hip hop, and there are some moments that I liked on Feed the Streets 3.
You just fucking fried him, dude. You were like, everything sounds the same. His lyricism's crap, but it's still better than the last album, man. Just ah, that was great to hear. It was like so many. It was like such a veiled like compliment in a way, but I think you're exactly right. I found myself just like I didn't really enjoy this much at all. The sameness for me. I mean, this just felt like fairly generic. I listened to this, and I listened to this right after I listened to Sweetie, and I'm like, oh man, like just the difference in like energy and
Hmm.
like confidence and like uniqueness was so drastic. And it really feels like Roddy is just kind of trying to be like one of those like down the middle type rappers who's kind of using like these beats that sound incredibly familiar. I don't feel like he's like doing anything that's super out there,
Hmm.
and or like really pops in comparison to his peers. And I don't know. I didn't find myself too impressed with this, other than probably Twin with Lil Durk, which I thought
Dirk
was
went
like,
hard as hell, didn't he?
yeah. But that's the thing, is I was like, damn, like Dirk shows up and just fucking steals the song. It's like, okay,
For
cool.
sure.
I don't know if that's what the takeaway that Roddy wanted from this album, but okay, that's where we're
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, no, for me, it's a lot of moments, right? Like, you got a short song like Stop Breathing, which I think is pretty good. A song like Fade Away. Um, that hook melody, it's a bit slower, but I think that's actually Roddy. He sounds really comfortable, like the fade away. Like he just like actually like
Mm.
sounds like really smooth when he does that sometimes. And like some moments like that I think like stood out to me. Heavier, again, the hook catchy. He's like, da 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 got heavier, da 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 got heavier, like stuff
Oh
like that.
yeah.
Just kind of it's a bit stickier than some of his more recent music, at least. My favorite song is "Number One Freak" with Ty Dolla Sign. Is that a raunchy, misogynistic hip hop song? Absolutely. But God, is that shit catchy as hell. Like, I don't know. I loved it, man. It's a toxic song, but I really dug it.
Yeah, I agree. That was another one that stood out to me and just sounded different energy to it. Uh, Maybe he needs to do like a collab album with someone or find someone he can collab with, but
I think
I
if we
don't know,
could
man.
just like get some better production, like you're on Atlantic Records, surely the beat budget could be increased because it's just uninspiring. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like he has enough vocal talent that with better beats things would be more evident as catchy, you know. And the first record, please forgive me for being antisocial, you know, I thought the beats were way better on that, you know, and just more inspired choices, right? Like when he would have like background choir on some of his songs, where then if he like slowed it down or was doing more of a storytelling type song, it just kind of livened him up. But when he doesn't have, I think, those other flourishes, it's really up to Roddy alone to stand out, and I don't think he has that consistency to really carry a whole album that way, at least
No.
not right now. And then it's perhaps even like eye opening or disappointing, depending on how you look at it, when you hear the last song, "Letter to My Son," where he's incredibly introspective
Hmm.
and inward looking. You know, I mean, I like the way he talks about it. He's like, I tried this. I did the street life. You ain't missing nothing. You know, whatever he says.
Hmm.
You know, it's like wow. It's like really perspective and like cool to hear that from him because you don't really hear poignant
No.
lyrics with any consistency from Roddy, but he did do it. I think really effectively on a slower song to end the tape. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Maybe in time he'll find more consistency, but I don't even know if I need that from him. I would just like better beats for
Hmm.
funner hits. You know, just
Yeah.
make some fun stuff because when I think of people that do the melodic hip hop type of stuff, he is one of the first people I would think of because like his hits are hits for a reason. He has some great
Right.
tracks to his name. So hopefully he can hone in. But I do think this is in a better direction than we had, you know, 11 months ago.
Hmm. No, yeah, I definitely think it's a step up. And you hear a song like Aston Martin Truck, which I think is one of the hits from this quote unquote.
Hmm.
Um, and like there's something there where like this could be catchier, this could be elevated, and it just kind of goes on too long, it falls flat, and it's like maybe yeah, I think you're right. Maybe if you get some better collaborators or people working with him to refine this a bit, he can recapture that magic. But a lot of it just kind of clicking through, it's like I don't know if this is anything
Hmm.
special right now.
Yeah,
So
he's still only 24. He just turned 24.
well, a lot of time for him to find his stride and make better stuff, but I don't think I don't think this is going to be the one. Feed the Streets 3. But let's let's wrap up today with a group that has been a part of nostalgia lore from almost the get go. Brockhampton. And I guess this is the Brockhampton eulogy, right?
Yes, yes, it is. Brockhampton is ending. Brockhampton is saying goodbye. And just right off the jump, we're going to review both of the new Brockhampton albums, the two final albums in very Brockhampton fashion. We're going to review the family, and we're also going to review TM. Check the description for the link to whatever album review you're not listening to or watching right now. And also check the link for our Brockhampton album rankings that we did in 2021 after Roadrunner came out. We reviewed and ranked their first six records, and now they have their seventh and eighth albums out, and we'll talk about them now. Yeah, man, Brockhampton, it's what a whirlwind, huh? To drop 8 albums in a 5 year stretch. Just an incredibly prolific run with many ups and many downs in the public eye. And, you know, they flirted with and walked back on breaking up and ending before, but I don't know how you could listen to the family and see how they were moving the past weekend and not believe them. Like, this was a cathartic breakup album from the group, the family was. And, yeah, I definitely think they're done.
Yeah, I think they're done. How are you feeling about it? 'Cause you've been riding with them almost from the jump, right?
That's right. Yeah, I picked up somewhere in 2017 with Saturation Trilogy was coming out. I saw them perform in early 2018, which was awesome. Um, I remember exactly where I was when Amir was kicked out of the group. I was
Mm,
in Venice, Italy, and I like checked my phone, and I like literally I remember sitting down on a bench in this little ass plaza, and I was like, "What the fuck? Amir's gone." We talked about that when that happened. We don't have to get into that now. Um, but yeah, no, definitely a huge fan of the group, and again, we did a whole rankings on them because I think they're the most exciting rap group of the last 5 years, without question. Um, and a big part of that has been how prolific they are, but also how wide ranging of genres they've dabbled in as a musical group, and also how they really platformed their own voices and kind of built people up. You know, artists
mm,
like Joba really came into their own in the back half of the Brockhampton run, for example. And to hear the family before we knew TM was coming out, to hear the family and realize that it's a Kevin Abstract solo affair vocally, be like, huh, wow, man, they're really on some bad terms, aren't they? Because that's how I felt listening to it.
mhm,
Because Kevin's really letting it fly, spilling some tea, telling you how he felt about a lot of different stuff that happened because a lot of things happened with them, and then you hear that last track and he's really congratulatory and uh, grateful for all his guys and shouts everyone out by name. And the next thing you know, they're releasing another album. TM stands for The Mountain, and you find out that that's like a traditional Brockhampton album with everyone in the mix vocally. And turns out that was resurrected from 2021 recording sessions and almost makes good on the promises Brockhampton often made but never actually delivered on, which was trying to save some of their past unreleased albums like Puppy and Team Effort. So like to hear TM be just like that's just another Brockhampton record. Look, there it is
mhm,
for you. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you to the fans type thing, and then also contrast that with the family and really having Kevin just bear his soul out and just let go of everything he's been holding on to the past few years. It's quite the juxtaposition, and they both are really, I think, serving like two different masters and with the intent, but also how incredibly Brockhampton to release a album after the final album came out.
right. Yeah. Of course, because they had to stoke the flames that they're never actually done. I've seen people saying that, this isn't it. People are in denial for sure. I think my main takeaway was exactly what you said. Like, oh, they must not be on great terms. If we're getting this like solo Kevin album out first, and then listening to that and TM back to back, it's like I kind of like just like the Kevin album. Like I thought TM had some okay moments, but like the Kevin album was so much more in the lane of music that I like, and felt a bit more jubilant. And I think
Hmm.
emotionally was what I was hoping to get. The Mountain
Yes,
feels a bit. I don't know. It feels exactly like you said. Like they revived some tracks that maybe they weren't planning on releasing initially, or were planning on going back to, and it just didn't feel as final. So I kind of wish they almost did it
yeah.
in exact or opposite order.
I completely agree. I think the family definitely feels like an ending. A
Yeah.
song or an album with a song called The Ending would make sense, right? But I mean, you listen to the ending, you listen to the final track, Brockhampton. That gives, I think, a Brockhampton fan a lot of closure hearing a song like Brockhampton, right?
Hmm.
Where Kevin really opens up about stuff that happened,
Yep.
explaining how the boys really drifted apart over money and creative differences. Not surprising reasons, of course, but you actually hear it from the source,
Hmm.
Like him and Jabari had a disagreement and the relationship changed. Flash forward, did they just perform 2 days ago their final show at the Fonda Theater on Hollywood Boulevard? They did. They were all there. They all seem to be vibing, but it's clear from these songs on the
Hmm.
family that things really did change. And that's why, like, I'm not necessarily yearning for them to stick together because it clearly just isn't like a tenable thing from a creative side of things, even if they're all cordial and kind of grateful for the run they had together, right?
Right.
Like the next few days, they're doing a I Miss the Band Already radio show on the AMP app from Amazon. and that's including multiple people of the group. Job tweeted it out as well as Kevin. Like they all seem to be like cordial and cool, but it also seems like they're quite happy to start doing their own things, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, to me, like hearing Kevin speak on how he like reconnected with Amir and then had to grapple with Dom's reaction to that because Dom had a very specific reason for wanting nothing to do with Amir anymore. Like hearing something like that, and Kevin basically like being like, "Yeah, I'm like a complicated guy, and I'm certainly not blameless and all this." Like to hear, I think that level of candor, that frankness,
Mhm.
it just goes, I think, a long way with the fans. I would not recommend either of these records, but especially The Family, to anyone who is not intimately familiar with the Brockhampton story. Like, clearly, you should be starting way earlier if you just actually want to
Yeah.
enjoy the music and understand what's going on. This is very in the weeds for the Brockhampton listener.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, uh there's even just like references to like San Marcos and stuff like that. And if you're just
Mhm.
listening, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? I think something like you can't, I didn't know that you couldn't feel free until you took the blue paint off or something like that. That's a line that you just will not understand unless you know that saturation one, two, and three happened, and that it was
Yep.
like this amazing moment for the band, but I think also something that made them feel a bit like pigeonholed creatively. And I think also
Mhm.
it probably led to a lot of these conflicts because their star just started to rise so quickly.
I mean,
Um,
and I think what's great about the family too is Kevin's able to, I think, weave in like meaningful lyricism about this topic while also making a good track. And I say look no further than Gold Teeth, where
oh
Kevin's
yeah,
flow is amazing. Do we see each other? Hardly. Should we mate together? Godly.
yeah,
And then what's he say? Like he basically says that they signed to RCA for too many records. It's like, did we something whatever? Probably, but however he says it. Like I was
mhm.
like, wow, not only does this song bang, but you really saying some shit right now.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, I thought this whole thing was really great, but I think one of the songs that I really appreciated the way he talked about things, and I think this is where you get a lot of the stuff with Amir. I think it's this song, and now I'm doubting myself. Is 37. I
Hmm.
really liked that
Yeah,
track a
the
lot.
vocal effects were cool.
Yeah, and I what I liked is like they like just they like brought back the sonics and they just put Kevin's like vocals right at the forefront. He sounds so crisp and confident,
Hmm.
and I just really loved that as like a switch up because I mean this is a really produced album, which is
Yeah,
something that's common for Brockhampton. They do a lot of splicing, they put in a lot of vocal effects and a lot of sounds, and it's part of why you love them. But this is a scaled back one where it's just him talking and just kind of spilling the tea. Pretty great. I thought that
totally.
was one that stood out to me. A couple other tracks I liked the beginning and the end of the album is very like celebratory sounding. Like, at the beginning you
Hmm.
get Take It Back, which feels like a throwback like Kanye or like
Yes,
Chance
that
record.
sample very reminiscent, isn't it?
Yeah.
How
And
could
then
you
you
not
have
love it though?
exactly. And then you have RZA, the next song, and
RZA.
that also sounds RZA, which also sounds just completely celebratory,
Yeah.
right? So you have those two back to back.
Ian, why don't you keep the band back together? I was like, oh man, they're getting right into it right away.
I know, I know. And then at the end, like you said, you get a couple of tracks in a row. I thought The Family was one that's really like
Hmm.
stood out to me, but then you get the ending and Brockhampton back to back, and it's like, fuck, like
Yeah,
this is so fucking good. This is exactly why people loved like Chance or Kanye when they were making stuff like this because this kind of music just fucking bangs, and Kevin can do this, man.
I know.
Like,
Um, the ending, the Willie Hutch "Let Me Be the One"
ah,
soul sample is incredible.
dude, one of the best samples I've heard since like I don't even know. Like
Yeah,
I
um,
can't even think of it. Pablo maybe?
like people know soul sampling in hip hop is tremendous when done
Mhm.
well. Obviously, Kanye really helped pioneer this, or at least really popularize it. And this is like right up there with the appeal of that sort of thing, And then meanwhile, Kevin actually raps and his lyricism, he's like telling a really personal story about how he's trying to live his life and not
Mhm.
have other people put expectations on him. And like that sample, it's just so moving, so affecting. Especially if you really had listened to the rest of the album and know everything that's been weighing on Kevin. It's like, oh man, really love that one. And then to immediately hear the final track, Brockhampton, as we said, that really to me, I was like, I'm listening to it, I was like, man, like it's making me a little sad. I'm not gonna lie, like just
Hmm.
hearing where things went wrong. You kind of knew it already. You understood it, but like to really hear him just say, it, it's like, man, I really just hope everyone can just move on and be happy with their careers because that one's a bit tough to listen to. Not gonna lie. But on the other hand, like I said before, a song like Gold Teeth, where you can bring this lyricism out into a song in a fun way. How about all that?
Hmm.
Blowing up ain't all that. Really,
Yeah.
they really, he's really interrogating, I think, fame and how their lives and their careers change at different parts in the Brockhampton arc. You get a little barefaced vocals on the family, but for the most, that's like I think the only moment where it's not Kevin. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, man. Also on the final track too, Brockhampton obviously speaks a lot about his collaborators, his boys in the band, and what happened. But he also kind of speaks on how like what they did without having radio hits and TikTok hits and not being on
Hmm.
playlists and stuff. Like it's I think quite wide ranging in the commentary and the recap, so it were, of what had happened. So yeah, I really really enjoyed the family, and I think it does fitting. Obviously, it feels fitting. Obviously, as a final work, even if we didn't get everyone else in the group. I think that's actually the most surprising thing about it is how good it feels as a grace note for Brockhampton, despite Kevin being the only vocalist. Like you wouldn't have
Right.
expected that. You would have thought this would have came off as super bitter and half-assed. And what's he say? The label needs 35 minutes of new music. Like you would have thought it
Hmm.
sounded like that, but it doesn't come across that way. And
Right.
then we'll get into TM now, but like then TM is a more of like, hey man, this is what it used to be like, and here you go. So, do you have any other thoughts on the family before we switch to TM?
Yeah, just two things. So, or I guess maybe three. So, boy band kind of starts with like I don't know who's talking, but someone is saying like, that boy band shit. That's like the only kind of shit that Brockhampton could pull off, and like it's true. Like they were just such a unique like group that they could say that shit and kind of make people believe it and make it feel real to them in a sense, which I really appreciated.
Best boy band since One Direction.
Yeah, one of the best lines from them of all time. Big Pussy, the fourth track, I really liked for multiple reasons. It had a feeling like when you see people go into these like morning shows and do freestyles, and like the beat just kind of keeps switching, going in different directions. And they just glide off of it. And of course, it starts off with this like jazz sample at the beginning, so you think it's gonna be some like I don't know, Kendrick shit, or something like that. And then he's like, "Shut your bitch ass up," and it just flips, and he just starts going. I just really loved that moment. Just thought it was great. You already said all that, but I mean, come on, having all that like sample and like using that as the beat to the song. Are you kidding me? Like
Yeah,
that's
TLC in there.
incredible. And then also, any way you want me. That's just something that only like Brockhampton can do, and that's like feels so specific to them as like just this band, this group that became more than just a hip hop band, right? They really like pushed themselves sonically and stylistically, and even if I don't love any way you want me, like I think it's still interesting that they did like this almost like old school like 60s 70s like pop sound in their
hmm
final album. Like good for them. I'm glad that they tried it. So anyways, that's it for me on that. Let's talk to me about TM. Like what did you like, what didn't you like?
Yeah, so obviously Brockhampton released TM as the follow up to the final album, The Family. Check the description below for a review on The Family and our Brockhampton album rankings. But TM obviously stands out in stark contrast to The Family for including the whole group on the vocals, whereas The Family was just a Kevin solo affair. So obviously different and obviously a bit more dated, less lyrically relevant to the finality that we were getting from Kevin on The Family. But it does kind of feel like a time capsule in a fun way because it literally was a resurrection of old sessions from like a year and a half ago. And I definitely heard some songs on TM that I liked quite a bit because they just reminded me of other good Brockhampton songs and like sonic approaches and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, it is interesting to listen to TM after listening to The Family because The Family is really effective as a closing statement to Brockhampton and really uh, nails it home that this group is ending, and creatively and personally these guys have moved apart. So then when you go backwards almost subject matter wise with TM, it's I think a bit jarring. But if you can remove yourself from that, I think there are some qualities to enjoy on TM as just a more Brockhampton type experience.
Yeah, I think that there's stuff to take away. I think it's also just for me, this is not the type of like Brockhampton shit that I tend to gravitate towards more. But I definitely think there's some moments that I liked. Like I already said, it felt a bit disappointing to have this be the final album. I wish they had just kind of like flipped them, but I get it. Is what it is. It's also hard because like the last track on this is called Goodbye,
Mm.
and to have something so like jubilant and celebratory as the ending on the family and then this goodbye, it's like, man, kind of like going out on a dud almost. Like I didn't love the track, although it definitely is emotional and moving. But yeah, tell me about the moments you liked first, and maybe we can get into the things that didn't work for us much.
Yeah, totally. I think right off the bat, the first song, FMG, Fuck My Gang, like that's just a
Mhm.
banger from
Yeah.
Kevin. Yeah, it's kind of simple, but I thought that one was fucking awesome, honestly. Um, and then right off the bat, the second song after that, the follow up, you have Animal, right? I think the melody on that one is really, really fun. You get this,
Hmm.
like, I think, cool auto tune from Matt Champion on that. And right there, like, that kind of speaks to, like, the back half of the Brockhampton experience where they were really jumping across genre and jumping across sounds. It is interesting, I think, that the family doesn't really give you a lot of the more singing and softer stuff that Brockhampton had made their biggest name on previously. I
Hmm.
mean, their biggest songs are Sugar and Bleach. Those are soft, more singing songs, right? For the most part, these two records, TM and Family, are much more, I think, in their saturation style of traditional hip hop. But you still do get some moments like on Animal. I liked Listerine because I thought Kevin's flow was really good, and I think the auto tune on him sounded quite good. I think that my favorite song on this is New Shoes, which has a music video out already, just because that's Kevin in his rapping bag. You got Merlin on there. I think he sounds awesome. Uh, I sold everything but pussy in my soul. Like I think that was really fun. And I was wondering too, did you like Keep It Southern? Because to me that reminded me a little bit of 1999 Wildfire, which I know
So
you love.
yes, I do love that track, and that was my clear standout from TM was "Keep It Southern." It was probably my favorite track. Really loved that, and you mentioned the two other ones that were my two favorites, FMG and Animal. I think those three are the ones that stood out most to me. There's a couple other like moments here and there. Um, Man on the Moon. You mentioned like the singingness. Like Man on the Moon is very singing. But it's like almost like so out there compared to some of the stuff that they've done. Like, it's like a true, almost like I can't even think of who I'm like thinking of, but like it feels so much more dancey than a lot of like the Brockhampton stuff. I guess when the chorus comes in, it's a little bit less out there, but there's moments where it just feels like a dance track, and I didn't really love that from them. Um, and then yeah, other things just kind of fell flat. Like Duct Tape had a cool beat, but it just is like so washed out, like vocally, that didn't really catch me. And then, like I mentioned, the final track, "Goodbye," I was like, I don't know. It also kind of felt samey in compared to something like Duct Tape 2 tracks before. It's like the beat's almost the exact same. So
Hmm.
just didn't feel as inspired, I guess.
No, I mean, and that I think that is to be expected. This was just stuff they made. These guys said they would make like 100 records at least each album cycle.
Hmm.
They worked a lot. They try a lot of different things. Naturally, not all that's going to work or be that great, and that's why it doesn't come out.
Right.
Um, and like I said, there's some good things I do like about TM, and I think it was good enough that was worth releasing, given like the perspective they were presenting as like, hey, this is just kind of like a final thank you to the fans. Like, enjoy this kind of time capsule work. Um, so I think if you look at it through that lens, is probably the best way to think about it. Um, Also, on Man on the Moon, the chorus there, which is like a super like high pitched like auto tune singing, that reminded me a lot of Knox Fortune, who people would know from his collaborations with
Mm,
Chance the Rapper on songs like All Night. I was like, is that Knox Fortune? It
wow.
wasn't, but I was like, man, that really brought me back to something like that.
Haven't thought of Knox Fortune in a very long time. Wasn't expecting to hear that today. As we're kind of moving towards the end of this review, I just wanted to get like your final thoughts. Like, what do you think Brockhampton's like legacy is going to be?
Well, I believe Kevin's. I think it's on the ending. Kevin says like Brockhampton top 10 all time or something like that, and like uh, there's a long storied history of groups in hip hop, so I don't think we can go that far. But that being said, they're definitely, I think, a very impactful group, given that they really, for the majority of that run, were more on the alternative underground hip hop side of things, were, as Kevin said himself, never really embraced by the mainstream in any sustained way, despite signing to a major record label in RCA. So the fact that they were able to, I think, overcome that and were never compromised in any way. Like we got so much variety from them, and just last year, we got one of their best records ever with
Hmm.
Roadrunner, which we both loved. You
Yep.
know, and I think just the way they were able to, I think, do so much in a short amount of time ultimately was probably to the detriment of this band sticking together. That much is pretty obvious, but I mean, they just accomplished so much in terms of what they released, and it's definitely a really strong catalog that will stand the test of time. I think Pete, that much is obvious, and obviously it also can makes you not want to look away because I think everyone is invested in many of these individuals and wants to see what is next for so many of these people. Obviously, Kevin Abstract has a solo career already. We'd love to see him fully dive into that and see what that means. He has a friendship with Tyler the Creator and other people. What could that mean? Ramil is probably an untapped mainstream talent when it comes to being a producer, and I'm sure he will be as busy as he wants to be and stuff like that. And then probably the most up in the air stuff would be those other guys, right? Like
Yeah.
what's next for like Joba and Matt and
Hmm.
Merlin, because I like them, but they really have no foundation as soloists to this point, and I wonder what they set out to do. Someone like Joba has a lot of energy, but also showed on Roadrunner last year that he has a lyrical pen as well. So I would be
Yeah.
very invested in seeing what's next from him.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so surprised that they didn't make this work ultimately is that so many of these guys haven't established themselves as a solo artist yet, and even if Brockhampton is just on taking a year or two break, to give them an opportunity to like do some solo work, kind of explore their own vision. It just feels like there's so much more that they could have gotten out of it together. But I think people would say that about most bands that break up early, or most creative collaborators that don't can't work things out. Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. I think for me, as I think about like what their legacy will be, not only as this like you know band, boy band, hip hop group, however you want to label them, that I think not only unexpectedly came and made some of the most interesting hip hop music of the last decade now, but I think there's this like aspect of them like pushing creative boundaries that while also still like making music that felt familiar, that's really like interesting and cool to them. Like we kind of talked about with the family, but I think when they were at their best, they were taking stuff and adding this like Brockhampton twist to it, which is like something unexpected, something with energy that's like overwhelming, over the top, or talking about things lyrically that you wouldn't expect to hear from them or their peers, and normalizing these topics. Um, in a way that it just was so interesting and so unique that it was like really like catching lightning in a bottle in the best way possible, and really grateful for the, I guess, like 8 albums we got, 7.
8 albums
So
and a mixtape. Yeah, it's a
all
lot of
right,
music.
we'll take it. um yeah, so RIP to Brockhampton. I can't wait till we get the reunion tour someday, but Any last thoughts on them?
Nah, man. Just would love to figure out what's next for many of these guys, and I'm sure we'll start to hear stuff eventually. But um, ultimately, I'm pretty at peace with the fact that they have split because it definitely seems like it was necessary for all of them.
Favorite Brockhampton song?
Sweet on
Uh,
Saturation 2, my
nice.
definitely my favorite. I think that just kind of the best qualities of them making a rap song is on that.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'd probably say Boogie.
Yep,
Just
banger.
it's the one. So, anyways, Dave, what we got for next week?
Yeah, so next week we'll be talking about the conclusion of Andor season 1. Very excited to get into that. What a joy this has been for all of us. Also, the third album from Stormzy, arguably the face of UK hip hop these days. Can't wait for that. And then a bunch of movies are coming out with Thanksgiving holiday weekend. You got the sneak preview release in pretty wide release. Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, the sequel to Knives Out, is coming out in theaters about a month before it hits Netflix. And then, of course, Steven Spielberg's autobiographical drama, The Fablemans, a Best Picture contender, will be coming out. And also a Timothy Chalamet reunion with Luca Guadagnino about cannibalism, bones and all. I mean,
Hmm.
who doesn't want to see a movie about cannibalism, right? I mean, right after we eat all this turkey, we're gonna watch some people eat humans, right? Sounds great.
I have to say, I do not feel like Timothy Chalamet is someone I would want to eat. Does not look appetizing to me. It looks a little bony. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but we'll wrap up there. Drop your Timothy Chalamet thoughts in terms of cannibalism below, and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Hit that follow on youtube.com/nostalgia pod. Also go to our Twitter at nostalgia pod. Follow the link tree. Follow the podcast any way you want to there. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe. We'll catch you next week.